Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining. So this is just one of our sort of normal 15-minute, 20-minute sessions, but it's a real treat. I have I would say, one of the most productive ML engineers and coders that I've seen in, quite a while. Emmanuel, tell us a little bit about yourself and, what sort of things that you're doing at the moment.
Okay, so thank you so much for having me, Adam. I really appreciate being here. So, like Adam said, I'm Emmanuel Champon. I'm a recent computer science and math graduate, and I'm currently working as a machine learning engineer. So, my interest in machine learning varies. Uh, I've been fortunate to work on projects in computer vision, even speech to text recognition, also using technologies like the Google Assistant and Amazon Alexa. But it's just my interest in machine learning is really broad. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and I should really say that, like, I actually came across you by pure serendipity. I'm quite active on LinkedIn and try to see, what sort of stuff's kind of new and on the scene. And I came across you completely randomly. So it wasn't like, I don't think there was like a friend that introduced me or something. It's just your content seems to trend. And really, like, so this kind of talk for everybody at home is really aimed to be sort of more general. We're not going to dive too deeply. And, this is kind of why I think this is where it's all about, right? So we have people coming from all walks of life making big impacts with software and new sort of models that they're developing, which just wasn't really possible 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I kind of just want to just tease that out a little bit about from yourself. So, I mean, like, can you kind of talk to us about how did you get to where you are?
Okay. So I think, like a lot of people, I didn't have a conventional way to machine learning. I didn't really know about machine learning till like in my second year in college. I was very fortunate to do an internship where my manager was like, "Hey, I want you to focus on this data analytics project." So that was like my first introduction to like data with like Python. And as I was doing it, it was the same time I got introduced to like online learning, right? So I think at that time, Andrew Ang on Coursera was huge, and so it was like this intersection between like my internship and then these online learning courses. And then I found out that, oh, this is something that I'm interested in, right? So that intersection is what drove my initial interest in like machine learning, right? And I think the more I got into it, the more interesting it became. And then I was like, I'm learning all these things through these online courses. How do I apply it to problems that I face, right? How do I make what I'm learning practical? So I started building these projects from the courses that I was taking. So bear in mind that I took a lot of courses at the time. And so transitioning from like taking those courses to building real world projects was a bit easy for me because I was like, even if I didn't like have particular solutions, I knew where to look for these solutions. And that's what caused me to start building projects. And in terms of the frequency of the project, those online courses allowed me to develop a kind of a schedule for myself, right? A schedule for how I learn and how I build things. And I did that in college, and I think it never really left me. I'm still accustomed to that schedule of like, okay, if I want to do this, I have to do that. So I'm just riding the wave of that scheduling thing. Yeah. But also the field is a very interesting field. I feel like anybody who gets into it gets like there's so much information and there's so much data, and you're like you keep diving deeper and deeper, and it's like it's fun as well. So it's just you just keep growing in it, and that's what I'll say about it.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing, right? So it's like machine learning in general and AI. I think, if we look back, say 10 years ago, it was quite treated like kind of like a mysticism, like a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Most people back, say, 2010, 2008, considered it to be beyond cutting edge. It's
Yeah.
the sort of thing that, just people in lab coats would do. Let's get kind of straight to the meat of the things, right? So one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why I'm doing these kind of talks and these podcasts is it's like, I want to just hit like the everyday people, right? So it's like
Yeah.
not just ML engineers and data
Yeah.
scientists, but, like my mum, right? And like plumbers and painters. Like, do you feel like, I know this is a really tough question, right? And
Mhm.
do you feel like AI and ML, there's a little bit of something for everyone? Like, even if it's not coding, if it's like project management, or just using it for their job and their role, and where would you say we are right now?
So I think in answering the first question, right, I'll use this analogy, right? So there are a lot of people who get on the internet and make posts on Facebook every day, right? But they have no clue how web applications work. They have no clue how the database works for them to post a picture of their cat, but they still get to use the
Here,
internet
here,
every
here.
yeah. So I think that's the thing that you don't have like when a lot of people think of AI and ML, they're like PhD, like you said, robots and like flying automated vehicles. But the truth is that just as in web development, right, you don't have to be like a full stack developer in order to use Facebook. That's how I think that machine learning and AI is. You don't have to be like this deep learning researcher in order to recognize the impact of AI and ML and also to take advantage of it, right? So again, with the internet as an example, so many people have made a lot of money on the internet being influencers, and they have no idea how, like say YouTubers, they have no idea how like the YouTube structure is, but they still utilize it every day. So I think that's how it is. There is something for everyone, and even if you're not technical, right, you don't have to know like all the math behind it to utilize it, right? So that's the general answer. But in terms of like the more practical lessons, like I recently I found out that like the NBA uses machine learning a lot, right? And the people in the music industry, those this guy I was speaking to was working on a project for like the music industry and how they can use it to find the next big talent. It's just people realizing that like machine learning is just a tool, and that whatever your interest is, there is some way of applying that tool, right? So being able to understand to realize that is really important. Yeah, and
Yeah.
where we are going from. Oh, you can say something.
No, no, by all means, that's what I was going to say. So I kind of completely agree with you. Like, at the moment, I'm kind of seeing like where we are is more like we have this kind of like toolkit, right? And
Hmm.
AI is one of those. It's like the spanner or the screwdriver, and it just so
Yeah,
happens to be quite useful right now. And
yeah.
that's, it's like you say, right? I mean, it's like if you go online right now, you'll see the AI community are like literally falling over themselves to do anything with coronavirus, right? So it's like literally like everybody who's like learned their very first classifier, they're like, I'm working on the cure. And you know what, man, that's good, right? It's like yeah, sometimes it's like, okay, calm down, Karen, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
in other areas, it's quite amazing and inspirational. And I guess this is kind of where, like, do you ever like sit down and think about like, where's this leading to? Is this going to be like how the innovation of, say, like Windows or the iPod, it's going to become more seamless to the everyday sort of people on the streets? Or is it going to be much more impactful where they're going to see it everywhere they go? Kind of like, what's your thoughts on that?
Again, I think it's still brand new, right? It's still in the early stages, and people are still playing with it. Again, to use an analogy, right? I think of it as like the way app development was a huge thing back then. uh, it's still huge, right? But like back, there was a time when everybody was trying to build an app, and it was the hot thing. Like every developer was trying to get into like iOS or Android development, right? And I
Yeah,
think
man, yeah.
it is, but then Android development and iOS still exists, right? Even though like you can say that maybe machine learning has more hype than maybe app development at this point, but app development still exists. So that's how I see it. I think that there's going to be a point where the hype is going to plateau, right? And even though more people will get involved in it, and because there's going to be more people involved in it, that means there's going to be multiple solutions coming to various problems, right? So I think that there's going to be a time where like just as people are able to create apps for literally anything, there's going to be a time because of the knowledge that is abounded. Machine learning is going to. There's going to be a time when like machine learning is going to be able to help multiple problems because it's moved from this thing that only a few people can do to things that more people can do. And when more people can do more things with it, then they can solve their own problems essentially. Yeah. So that's where I see it going. Having
Yeah.
multiple voices at the table, multiple people building various things uh, using machine learning so that they can solve like multiple problems.
Yeah, and that's kind of like where I'm seeing it right now is you kind of have like the initial, if you imagine like the curve, right? So you have this
Hmm.
spike of interest, and
Yeah.
I believe that was the same, right? So it's like I'm 35, so not super young, but
Yeah.
I do remember when I was like 10, that was like the
Yeah.
last AI winter. So we have these kind of AI winters that spike and drop and spike and drop,
Drop. Yeah. Yeah.
and me being kind of like a football fan of a Liverpool, we always say this is our year, and I kind of feel like
Yeah.
that's the same with ML right now. I really do feel like this is the time. I do
Yeah.
feel like we're going to plateau again, like you say, but I think it's kind of here to stay, for sure. And so let's just kind of drive on to this a little bit more, right? So we both agree that it's kind of like here, but I think the problem's like the barrier to entry, right? And
Yeah.
where do you see like the chat? Like, do you think that's true? Do you think there is a barrier to entry? And number two, like, how can we like help that? How can we reduce the barrier for like trying to get our friends into ML and AI?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to speak from like my perspective, right? So like the first time I ever heard of ML, like again, I saw it as something that dealt with robots and like automated cars, right? But then I took an online course and then I saw like the math behind it. So I was like learning about deep learning and then I saw like back propagation and then I saw it was like differential equations and calculus. And like this is the same differential equations and calculus I did in high school, right? And so like I didn't take those seriously in high school, even though I did do math later in college. I just think that the barrier of entry, like the main barrier of entry, is that a lot of people are seeing the end results and not the uh, the internal workings, right? So I think that when people realize that like an autonomous vehicle, like there's a math behind it and that the math is explainable, it is going to lower the barrier of entry a bit because when people don't see any longer as like this magical thing, but this thing that can be explained with X's and Y's and Z's. I know not a lot of people like math, right? But I think that will lower the barrier of entry a bit. And I also think that when people realize that it's simply a tool that they can use in their very everyday life, or it is still being used every day, right? Let's say people realize that like the Netflix recommendation engine is like an application of machine learning. Or maybe I don't know, maybe the YouTube algorithm has some version of machine learning in it. Or whenever they are typing a Gmail, an email through Gmail, and then Google is able to predict what the next sentences might look like, is using some version of ML. It just kind of it eases them to realize that it's something that is already a part of their day-to-day lives, and so like learning it isn't like too far a stretch. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's right. So like we kind of got 2 points there, right? So which is one is like this transparency, right? At the moment, it's
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
like there's this like mysticism, right? It's like
Yeah.
yeah, and I do feel that. Like I feel personally when I first got into AI, I only got into it because I thought I was smart, right? So it's like most people. It's like, well, I'm really smart, and I did quantum physics at university, so I can do
See.
AI. And it's
Yeah.
like now I realize, both of them are just like the internet, right? You could learn about the internet forever. Like you could just
Yeah.
it's a bottomless pit, right? You'll never
It
learn
is.
everything,
Very true.
but you can learn enough, right? You can
Yeah.
learn and so the next part, like you kind of mentioned, right, which is like most people don't quite realize how impactful it is in our daily life, right? It's like
Hmm.
where it's being implemented. But
Okay.
I do have a third question for you. How do you feel about AI out of the box? For example, like SageMaker and all of these new tools that it seems to me that there's a race like from business and finance
Yeah.
to wrap as much of these functionality into like a nice little bundle that with a
Hmm.
nice little front end, and you just push the button
But
and you give it your data and you push the button, and that and out comes what you need. Do you think there's value in that, and do you think that could be where we could be going?
yeah, I think I'll touch on that using like my experiences again. So I'm an average user of Google Cloud. I really like it, and I think they're great with machine learning, right? And I think AutoML has a simple classification tool where you just upload your images, you train your model, and then you can like make REST calls to that model and then get feedback, right? But I also built a PyTorch classification model from scratch. I would say that the Google one was more efficient, right? And if I were like a startup and I didn't have enough funding to hire a machine learning engineer, like that would be easier or a quicker way. And also, like if I were to just want a simple proof of concept, right? Those out of box AI tools, like the Google one I said, would be a quicker way because building your own model from scratch takes time, it takes skill. And I don't think that, and it might take money in some cases, right? So having those tools on the cloud or wherever, making it easier, makes it easier to at least prove your concepts, yeah, and also makes it in some sense cheaper, right? So I do think those things are here to stay because like cloud is here to stay, obviously, I think. And so the integration of like machine learning in the cloud makes business sense, right? However, like you said, there to every there are consequences to every action, right? So even though it's good, uh, it's not very customizable. It's like sometimes you might want to make certain edits and it will not be able to make those edits. So building those from scratch, and again, security issues. I don't think a lot of maybe big companies might not feel secure sending their data to the cloud, like the public cloud. So they might need certain things. Yeah, but I think it's just like there's a balance, right? There are merits of using these out of box tools. They're quicker, they're more efficient, in some cases cheaper, but also they're less customizable. It could be less safe, depending on how you look at it. And so it's just a balance, right? But I do think that they are here to stay. And I think that like more and more people, especially people like me who are trying to get in at the very start, is an easy way to start learning machine learning, right? If you just know how to do it on the cloud without having to like
Yeah.
build everything from scratch.
A good one. Let's just kind of tighten this point, right? Because I think this is a great one. So I have lots of CEO friends that are watching this who have no money,
Yeah.
right? So it's like if I'm pretty sure most of us who are quite talented, on LinkedIn we have like many CEO friends that are trying to start up some great things. And so this is the question, right? So my question to you is do you think that say these out the box solutions like Google, like you mentioned, would that be a good thing for them to do like a rapid prototyping? So they build, they want to see
Yes.
the product works, they want to put it to
Yes,
market.
definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Azure has good ones as well too. I think AWS, like you said, AWS Sage. Yeah. So they're really easy to use. I think every developer probably will be able to use it because it's just REST endpoints, right, and making calls to it. So I think it's easy. It doesn't really require like very specific technical skills, unless maybe being able to use cloud. But it's a great way. It's a great tool to use.
okay, so I'm going to change gears up a bit, right? Because this is something that I've got to be in my bonnet, and I quite reference this quite a lot. So I'm going to see what your thoughts are. Do you feel like there's any sort of elitism in either coding, tech, or AI in general? Like,
Yeah, so I think like from machine learning, I think it's obviously exists, right? Because I'm sure there are people who have like PhDs and have spent like 20 years trying to do machine learning. And then like there are people who are just taking online courses who are claiming to be like machine learning engineers. So there's going to be this friction, right? There are going to be people who think that there's a proper way to do certain things. They'll be like, and if you don't follow the path that they followed, there's going to be some friction. That's what I think. So I think there is elitism, but I think even though there is elitism, the machine learning community, I think they've, in my opinion, they've risen up to try to help as many people as possible, right? if you look at people like Andrew Ang, who tried to democratize like machine learning through his courses online, and so many amazing people who have all this experience, and like their entire vision is to help the next generation of technologists, right? So even though there is elitism, I think that there is enough people wanting to help more people get into machine learning that you can choose to like not focus on that. I know that makes sense. Like there are conferences trying to help more people from various backgrounds to get into machine learning. There are various podcasts, there are various courses. So I think that elitism does exist, true, but I think the community as a whole is working really hard to make sure that anyone who shows any level of interest is at least given enough resources to start or to be engaged in the community.
So I'm going to run you back to the earlier point, right? Because now we've kind of
Mm-hmm.
come in, and it's like you're a very hyper productive person, right? Like, how do you manage your productivity, right? There'll be lots of people at kind of at home and they've got like a full time job, and their parents, you know, they've got kids. Like, how would you recommend them to get in, and what would you recommend for them to maximize their time to deliver whatever it is they want to do?
Oh, okay. So I think it's a very personal question, right? Because everyone has, like you said, everyone has their own unique times and their own ambitions, their own goals. So like when I started, like I really wanted to be a good engineer, right? I wanted to be like Jeff Dean and Ian Lecan. So I was like, okay, how do I get to be in this place? It means I have to put in the work, right? And so I built a schedule for myself surrounding that particular goal. Like I hope to be like Jeff Dean one day. So like, how do I do that? By building projects, reading research papers, uh, taking courses, making sure I'm involved in the community as possible. So all the things that I do is just because of this particular goal that I have in mind, right? And so it's just like scheduling my time with that goal in mind. So for example, when I was in college, I would work. I set up uh, 10 hours a week for like online courses, like 10 hours a week. And it was dispersed as and how I saw fit. But I was like, these 10 hours this week, every week, I'm doing online courses only, right? And so being able to do that myself is what really helped me. And then like I developed that habit, and I don't think I've let it go. So all the things that I do is because of the way I schedule myself in college, and I'm still like riding the wave, like I said earlier on.
That's right. It's about kind of self discipline, getting your schedule, making sure that you find what it is that you're looking for. So this, I'm going to ask you a wee bit more, which is along the lines of like, how do people identify what's a waste of time? And what I mean by that is like, there are a lot of courses out there.
Yeah,
Particularly like you're going to YouTube video. I'm not mentioning the name, but there are half of the ML tools that you search, and the very first YouTube video is by a certain brand that make a lot of money, and yet they go for an entire hour before they even get into like this is how you do it. And
yeah.
so like how do you avoid the bullshit?
For me, it takes experience, right? Because I think if you're very new to like online learning, it's very hard to determine which one is good, and because you don't know what it is, right? So I think it's just uh, learning over a period of time, taking courses over a period of time before you will be able to identify which one is BS, like you said. But like at the very start, it's very difficult to be able to, because if you don't know what you don't know, then you don't know if what you're being told is right or wrong, right? So it's just
Any you would recommend?
definitely. I really enjoy Coursera. I've used the platform for a while, and I highly recommend it. Andrew Ang's course on machine learning on Coursera is a great one. IBM has a data science professional certificate, which is also awesome. And I think the University of Michigan has a course on Python and data science, which is also amazing, right? But I think like Andrew Ang's is like the basic that gives an introduction to everyone. So
I kind of have to say, like, I'm mostly in agreement with you. So I would say there's, for me, Linux Academy works really awesome. They're really good,
uh,
right?
great.
Expensive, but if you can afford it, it's gonna, they have like really high quality resources. cloud guru. Yeah, they're good. I like their people, and sometimes they come to Scotland and I've heard some stories about their drinking habits. So apparently the people like Cloud Guru can really drink, which is awesome. And so for me, I would mostly agree. Pluralsight, they're quite good. They're
Hmm.
very niche. Do you see machine learning in any form being taught to children, like let's say between the ages of say 8 and 12? Do you see it getting to the level of importance being so important that we have to give some cushion, like some introduction in earlier years?
Oh, okay. So like I would say that like math is being taught in these schools, right? And I'm sure like calculus at some level, right? And statistics, like these are like the basics, fundamentals of learning it. So I think we are already teaching like the basics of like AI and ML if you're teaching statistics and linear algebra and like calculus in school. But also like we do know that like the way the world is moving, coding is going to be taught at a very basic level, right? And I think that in addition to coding, there's going to be more like specific tools with code that is going to be taught as well. So I do think that there's going to be a point where like specific AI courses aimed at children is going to be taught in schools as well.
Okay, there are going to be a lot of sysadmins out there, right? And I kind of resonates with me, right? A lot of my sysadmin friends kind of, it feels to me like the other spectrum for them, right? And they want to know how to get into ML. It does feel for many techies, network engineers, sysadmins, even cloud engineers, it feels to them that machine learning is predominantly development work. And do you feel like if you were to say to them, like, what would you say would be the minimum amount of coding, of development knowledge that they should have? Like, what sort of, like, I'm pretty sure you can do a lot of this in a bash script, to be honest, but
Yeah. So I think being able to like from a Python perspective, right? Being able to understand how Python packages work and read Python documentation is like basically it. Because I think that with that knowledge alone, you'll be able to at least get at the beginning, right? But I think I read somewhere that machine learning ops, ML ops, is becoming a thing now. And so I think that even
yeah.
though right now machine learning is focused more on development, there's going to be a time where you're going to need like the full like software development cycle inside of machine learning. And when that time comes, like it's not just the developers who are going to be like needed, right? Everybody in the spectrum of like software development or anyone who touches that spectrum is going to be important. And so I think that skill is always going to be needed, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. You kind of hit the nail on the head there, right? It's going to be at all aspects of the software development lifecycle, even BAs and PMs, right? They're going to have to
Yes.
get dirty with this stuff, which is
Yeah.
it's kind of good because in a way, for me, I think that's the main thing. Unfortunately, here comes the next question: is like because everybody's going to ask, what is the minimum amount of math? Like, what's the bare minimum amount of math they need to know?
Yeah, I think for like classical machine learning, right, statistics is important and probability. Uh, yeah, I think like I'm from a math background, so I think that like everyone should know some basic calculus. It's just, but I think statistics, probability, and calculus, it's yeah, I think it's the bare minimum. But again, it's yeah, that's what I think. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, to be fair, right? It's like it's a tough question I'm giving you,
It
and
is.
you've answered it in the most textbook fashion. Living in the States and in the UK, one thing that we have in common hugely is polarization in the media, right? And the way that ML is being communicated to the public, I mean, is disputable, right? So there are many data scientists out there who feel it's not being communicated in the right light. Where do you stand on that? Like, what's your position?
Yeah. So for me personally, right, when I want to learn about ML stuff, I try to read research papers and like look at conferences and then read a bit of blogs. But I usually try to, from a ML engineer perspective, I'm always like stalking GitHub repos. I'm always trying to see what other people are building because I feel like the more what people build is where like the field is heading. So that's what I always try to see how people are implementing like research papers. So I don't really read a lot of it from like the mainstream media from my perspective. I try to avoid it because like you wouldn't want to take like health advice from someone who's not a medical doctor, right? Like you can listen to them, but like that's how I feel about it. It's okay for someone to give their opinion on like where AI and ML is heading, but there are researchers who actually get paid to do this. So I'd rather listen to them and read what their thoughts are than let's say like a journalist opinion on that. So that's my perspective. So.
This is great, right? Because you're like following the most classical definition of a data scientist, right? I mean, you're very like all of the things that you're saying, like reading papers, stalking GitHub repos. I mean, this is fantastic, and it's great advice for a lot of people that want to get into the field. So, let's try and move you out of your comfort zone a little bit and say, like,
Yeah.
what about your mom and your dad and your friends, like your friends who, like, let's say the bus driver, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you feel like the media, what can the media, or like people who are like work for the BBC or CNN, or just people who write communication blogs, like how
Yeah.
can they get it more accurate, or what can they
Accurate.
do to be more fair?
Uh, I think they should have like again these researchers actually be the ones who they communicate with, right? And not maybe like a propagandist or something. They should talk to actual people who are doing research on this and building these things. So those people
Right.
should become like the celebrities who get to put their information, not just anybody at all. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a room in the space for ML engineers and data scientists and people in AI to move into like specialist like publication of media, like like I'm the AI guy, right? Is that
Yeah, I think
possible? Do
so.
you feel?
I think there are people who try to do it, even on YouTube, right? I know not all of it is credible, but I think there are people who try. I think Alex Lieberman, I don't know his last name. He works at MIT, and he tries to do. I don't know. Yeah, he tries to like do interviews with like current people in machine learning, and he tries to make it very, very informal and non-technical at all. So like he has a podcast, and he tries to like get those perspectives on the table. So I think those types of things are important. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's any shortcomings of AI, or do you feel like what do you feels like on the horizon for tomorrow?
So I think I read this really interesting article about like quantum mechanics and AI, which I couldn't even wrap my head around it. But I think it was like really like next level how like you can use like apply like use quantum computers for machine learning and AI, which I don't know how is even possible, but I think that would be fun, something fun to look at.
Yeah, awesome. I do think I kind of agree that's probably on the horizon next, right? It's like the next best thing. And I think AI might get us there to the quantum computing stage. And but yeah, I mean that's a topic for another day. I
Yeah.
just want to say a big thanks for your time. I'm gonna leave Emmanuel's contact details, like his LinkedIn and things, follow him. He does produce some of the most amazing material out there, and I am sure we'll be
Thank you.
hearing much more from you soon. So
Yeah,
it's been a
definitely.
pleasure, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Adam. We really appreciate it.